Welcome to Dale's Dominion podcast, where we discuss Virginia real estate and beyond. Here's your host, Dale Shoop.
Welcome to Dale's Dominion, Virginia real estate and beyond, the podcast where we connect, uplift, and share valuable knowledge with folks in the real estate industry. I'm your host, Dale Shoop, and my guest today is Susan Melendez of Kline Realty. She has a career that spans multiple industries and a passion for both history and real estate. Susan is a trail rider, an avid hiker, an educator, a gym goer. She brings an incredible amount of energy and dedication to her work, ensuring that her clients have a seamless and positive real estate experience. She's also the founder of Learning Unbound, an organization that provides enriching learning opportunities for children. Susan, welcome to the show. I'm really glad you're here. Your bio is filled with energy and dedication. Your background includes roles in retail, dentistry, health coaching, and a history teacher. Can you share a little more about your history and the journey to real estate? No problem.
So I actually grew up in Pendleton County, West Virginia, in a little place called Fort Sybert. I went to Franklin High School, which is no longer Franklin High School, it's Pendleton County High School. I grew up on a farm. It was primarily a hog farm, but we also raised beef cattle, and we had cows to milk and chickens that laid eggs just for us. We were a very self-sufficient farm. We raised goats and whatnot. And of course, I convinced my parents to get me a horse when I was about probably 5 or 6 years old. But I was very blessed because growing up on the farm and out in the mountains, the outdoors definitely was my playground. Back in the day when I was a kid, we had one channel on the TV, and until I was probably 6 or so, it was a black and white, very fuzzy channel. So there really wasn't much interest in TV. Playing outside and on the farm was definitely what we did. And we were blessed, like I said, because my dad's parents, my grandparents, lived next door, and we got to spend a lot of time with them, and they were just incredible influences in my life for sure. So there was no really sitting around doing nothing. We were always learning to garden, learning to sew, taking care of animals, helping with farm work. And to make it more interesting, our home site is on a very historical site itself. So, and I'll tell you all about that, I'm sure, before we're done.
Yeah, we'll get to that soon enough. So you've worn many hats in your professional life, from retail to education and now real estate. So how have all these diverse experiences influenced your approach to selling real estate?
That's a great question. I definitely have some very diverse background experiences. I'd say primarily my work ethic comes from being raised on a farm setting, and just is ingrained in my soul and who I am that if something needs to be done, you're going to figure out how to get it done. And for example, on the farm, you don't just take a vacation and go on and kind of ignore the animals of the farm and the work that has to be done. You stick to it no matter what. You make sure it's covered. And so I've also worked in a lot of different types of job settings where accountability and responsibility were incredibly important. I won't go through my entire crazy long resume of jobs, but I've worked in multiple factory settings, a shoe factory, a poultry factory. One summer I even helped hammer roofs on poultry houses. That was not fun, but I did it. But teaching, of course, is definitely a role that you definitely have to have serious responsibility, accountability, work ethic, and much care for others. And I think that has helped me to deliver exceptional quality service to all my clients, because I am an educator at my core, and making sure that people understand the process, which can be crazy and daunting and is always changing and all transactions are different, as you and I know.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of that background with these jobs that I've done has helped to that end.
You speak Spanish too. So how has being bilingual enhanced your ability to connect with folks here in the Shenandoah Valley?
Um, well, that's a whole nother population that also needs help. And I enjoy educating those that need help no matter what language they speak. It just so happens that I can communicate fairly well in Spanish, and I don't mind taking the time and explaining everything because, our documents are all in English
Yeah.
and they won't be translated to other languages. Believe me, I've checked into it. Um, so, I really want to help people understand, all people, and
Yeah,
being able to use my skills speaking another language is a blessing.
absolutely. Yeah. So what advice would you have for someone who wants to start a career in real estate?
My advice is for anyone who wants to start a career in real estate, you know, first of all, as you're deciding on what brokerage to hang your license, make sure you do choose a brokerage that is a good fit for you because brokerages are different. And find out what level of support a brokerage is going to offer, what training. I was blessed at Kline to be assigned a mentor, and that mentorship was just amazing. I'm a very dedicated student and I want to know how to do things right. So having someone that really helped me through those first 10 transactions, having a dedicated support staff was also important to
Mhm.
me. Um, but, we're all at a different level of comfort. But I would say just make sure that if you're considering a career in real estate, really know your brokerage options and choose one that is best for you because things are always changing in real estate. And even seasoned realtors still need to be abreast of the changes and what's happening.
Sure. Yeah, that's great advice. Um, you also emphasize the importance of staying informed about market trends. So how do you stay current and what are you seeing now?
Well, okay, so I stay current just because I live it. Like I'm in it every day. I'm
Yeah.
inundated with it for sure. But in addition to that, again, kind of back to that advice for a new agent, choose a brokerage who's going to help you stay abreast of this information that's always evolving and changing. So we talk about this, my
Yeah.
colleagues and with my broker. And I'm constantly reading the news articles and things like that I can get my hands on. Um, and what trends do I see? Well, it's still a seller's market. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a very low inventory. Certain properties that are coming on the market, there's multiple offers. I think it's harder for a number of buyers right now just because the interest rates went up a good bit since like 2020, 2021. Relatively speaking, from someone who's seen rates way higher, I still think rates are good, but it definitely has an impact on what a buyer can afford each month. And people who were looking in that $400,000 range when the rates were much lower doesn't want that same payment now. So there's a big difference in that price point in the budget for buyers.
Yeah.
Um, I say just be patient.
Just be
It
patient.
is
Yeah,
always changing.
sure. It is. Um, tell us also about some of your hobbies. You have a love for riding horses and exploring nature. How do you and also how do you balance that with the demands of a real estate career?
Um, I don't make an abundant amount of time for me, but that's okay. I always make enough time. And I feel like the best way to take care of my clientele and do my job is to take a few minutes once in a while and kind of recharge my own battery.
Yeah.
I do have a lot of energy, but I also have to do something to kind of rejuvenate sometimes. And yes, I do have a lot of hobbies and I'm passionate about kind of a wide variety of things, but I love to be outdoors. I guess my favorite place to be is on my horse on a mountain trail. That's what I really, really love to do. I love to hike, love to kayak. I love to play volleyball. I love to camp. Anything outside, I'm good. I don't sit still very well. I also love to help others learn. And this kind of goes back. You mentioned that I had started Learning Unbound. And
Yeah.
the reason that I actually started that back in, I guess it was like 2017, I think. I was a middle school teacher for almost 25 years, and I primarily taught history and language arts. But I became concerned because a lot of the students that I was teaching, like, sixth graders, seventh grade, at the middle school age, they're kind of big enough. They don't really need the same level of a babysitter per se or daycare that younger kids do, but yet they're not really old enough to go out and get a job or find something healthy to do with their time. And a lot of my students were basically sitting at home over the summer break on their devices and their electronics.
Yeah.
And that really kind of bothered me because that's not how I grew up. And I wanted to get kids in as much of a hands-on and experiential learning setting as I could.
Okay.
And so I had this dream to literally do field trips with kids all summer and give them nothing but hands-on experiences. And so I set that up. Each week was a different theme, basically. And the themes were things like agriculture, business and industry, health and fitness, forest and water, basically like rivers, stream, career exploration. I think that first summer I did 7 weeks. And I think that very first summer I did 93 total field trips with kids. And
Wow.
I mean, we were going everywhere from like all different types of farms. They were learning all kinds of hands-on things on farms. And even like industrial settings, like at Lakeside Classics, they got to tour like the whole plant. Like, I mean, all kinds of like different hands-on experiences. And that I pared it down a little bit after that first summer and made it a little bit more manageable, but we still did a lot. Then COVID came along in 2020. And so then I kind of had to change my MO, and we did strictly everything outside. We didn't go tour the plants or anything like that because people were kind of afraid to have us come in, and then I guess the last time I've been able to do it was 2022. And then my daughter, my oldest daughter, and I have grown children. I'm a new grandma, which is awesome.
Congrats.
7-week-old grandson. But my oldest daughter, who is also a teacher, she came on board and was helping me in the last few years. But then in 2023, I couldn't do it because I was giving my father full-time care after his stroke. And then this year we didn't do it because, well, the grandbaby came in April, and I just knew that was going to be a huge distraction in our lives. So hopefully by next summer, we'll get back on track with that.
Oh, that sounds great. And you're also passionate about the Treasure Mountain Festival in West Virginia?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so when I was talking a little bit about my background, I mentioned that our home site's on a very historical setting. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned, but I am the oldest of 4 girls in my family. And so all of us grew up kind of immersed in history. From the time I was a child, like an infant, stories have been told about the history of the area. So in Pendleton County in Fort Sybert, it's named after the fort that was there, which is named after the captain of that fort. Back in the 1750s, during the French and Indian War era, the settlers, and a lot of those settlers were my ancestors, they were moving into territory where they weren't supposed to go. And they were setting up their homesteads and, of course, building forts, because during this time period, the English and the French were fighting over the Ohio River Valley. And both were playing pretty dirty, and they were both, getting their Native American allies to run attacks on the white settlers that had come into the area. And everybody wanted their own land just so they could do their own thing, or they wanted to kind of tap into that money-making industry on basically the beaver furs. At any rate, there was a fort built over in the little area where my family was and still is all these years later. But a band of Delaware and Shawnee Native Americans, led by Chief Kilbuck, who was a Delaware Indian, came down through the valley and attacked the various forts to try to run the settlers out.
Mm-hmm.
And Kilbuck actually attacked multiple forts in this area, including Fort Harrison and I believe even Fort Defiance, not all on the same trip. He made multiple. And another fort over close to Fort Seibert called Fort Upper Track. But at any rate, the fort itself stood where my great-grandparents' home was actually built. And that fort was attacked on April 28th in 1752. And we don't even know exactly how many people were in the fort, but a lot of the settlers from nearby came and took shelter because a lot of the men had sent their families there to kind of get into safety because they had to leave to go get supplies. And some of them went to, like, I think, fortify even another fort nearby. But history was not really written down very accurately back in 1758. You know, people just didn't think that, oh, this is going to be important later. So they didn't take time to take notes on such things. But at any rate, the settlers took shelter because they had wind that Kilbuck was kind of potentially on the warpath. And some people refused to get in that fort, actually. But on April 28th, sure enough, Kilbuck and his band of Shawnee and Delaware attacked the fort. And it was primarily women and children. They didn't have very many supplies. And at any rate, I won't tell the whole story right here because I could talk about this all day long. But we every year celebrate the heritage of the area. And so out on my family's property in Fort Seibert, where the fort actually stood, is where we do the primitive kind of piece of that history celebration. In the town of Franklin is also part of that celebration. And in Franklin, you can find all kinds of great attractions and food and vendors and things like that. A lot of crafts and some contests, and there's a parade. There's lots of fun things to do, and it's really a homecoming for people of that area. But out on my family's property, we kind of relive that time period. And so my family and a lot of other folks that help us, it's called the Kilbuck Rifleman Club, kind of maintains that field setting where we have the reenactment. We dress and live primitively. We have knife and tomahawk throwing competitions and muzzleloader shooting competitions. Wow. And a lot of like blanket trading, like people will bring, replicas of the artifacts from that period and you can buy or trade for them. Oh. People, cook over the fire, and it's a really, really good time, and it's a great place to get some hands-on history learning. So I would take students there to learn and teach them how to throw tomahawk and knife. It's amazing how many children I've taught to use a weapon. But anyway, it's a really great opportunity, and we do a reenactment of that attack on the fort. And so every year some of the club members rebuild a little replica of that fort, and then we reenact and then burn it at the end, just like what really happened in history. And on our property up on the hill is a cemetery where those settlers, and we don't know exactly how many's buried in a mass grave up there, but we tell the whole story. And then that cemetery is there, and that's another attraction. A lot of people like to go up and look. It's got like a rock wall around. It's always open to the public. I invite anybody and everybody to come and learn more in person, and it's always the third weekend of September. Okay. Always. And I'm happy to tell anybody how to find us over there. But the Fort Seibert Foundation is a nonprofit organization that my father, Jed Conrad, started. And because Dad had a dream to make a kind of a permanent replica of the fort that stood there. The problem is there's no actual photos or sketches of what that exact fort looked like. So, kind of trying to piece together what we can of the local history to do as much of an accurate replica as possible. And it's a pretty slow process, to build something like that. But Dad's dream was to build a permanent replica to be basically an educational opportunity year round for people to come and learn about the history, learn about the heritage, and just not let that go by the wayside. And like I mentioned a little bit ago, ironically, descendants from the settlers who were in the fort and even descendants of Chief Kilbuck, who led the attack on the fort, come together during this time. And it's fabulous.
That's great. I just want to take a minute to acknowledge you. Your journey is inspiring. Your ability to integrate energy and dedication and passion for education into your real estate practice is commendable. And your contributions through Learning Unbound and your commitment to going above and beyond for your clients have undoubtedly made a significant impact on the community. And your passion for history shines through even in our conversation today. So thank you. And I appreciate you for those things. And I always like to end with some questions about some local favorites. So do you have a local favorite spot to go hiking or camping?
Yes. My favorite spot to go is back to Fort Seibert.
Yeah.
And pretty much I have a travel trailer parked over on our property, and that's where I go to kind of stay on weekends if I don't have a lot of real estate related appointments.
Okay.
But because I'm licensed in Virginia and in West Virginia, that's kind of a good station for me to have it over there, because sometimes it works out that I'm busier on that side of the mountain than I am on this side of the mountain.
Okay.
So I get the best of both worlds. I can have my laptop and be doing work with my toes by the campfire and listen to the whippoorwills and the bullfrogs and look at the view of the mountains, and I am in my happy place.
That's fantastic. What about a favorite local restaurant here in the Valley?
That's tough because I love some of our local restaurants a whole lot. I love Rocktown Kitchen. Vito's, I absolutely love. Love Cross Keys Vineyard. Al Pastor is my favorite food truck. So I can always find a good place to eat here in the Valley.
Well, yeah, we are blessed with some great spots.
We really are.
Well, thank you so much for being on today. And I look forward to working with you and talking to you more. And I appreciate everything you do. Thanks.
Thank you for having me, Dale. It's been a pleasure.